Now, should we be teaching our children this divisive rhetoric? We'll start with you, Lin Mei.
I think there's no issues or nothing wrong with teaching it as an ideology, but as a fact, I'm massively against this. All schools have a statutory duty to be politically impartial. And what we're seeing teachers teaching it in such a way where it's being taught that white people are bad, all white people should be guilty of the past, and that's simply not true. And I always say this repeatedly, only a small fraction of white individuals were responsible for the transatlantic slave trade, and even in its entirety, it wasn't just white people. So why are young children having to be subjected to this?
I mean, there's so many things being conflated in this. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yes.
Mark, I don't even think we can teach about critical race theory in schools, can we? Because we can't. That's not what school's for. That's a university-level debate, and it's dangerous bringing this ideology into schools in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. This is not something children should be indoctrinated with, in the same way they shouldn't be indoctrinated with any particular ideological perspective. And when this is taught, or brought into the realm of public sector institutions, then counter-narratives, which are based on liberal rationalist methodology, unlike critical race theory, which is essentially just a sort of conspiracy theory, really, an updated version of the sort of stuff the fascists were coming out with in the 30s about Jewish people being part of some sort of power elite and other such nonsense, then there should be the opportunity to present an alternative perspective. But of course, that is not what is happening at the moment. The intention of the public sector institutions, schools, the police, you name it, is in fact to try and brainwash their employees and their pupils with a one-sided narrative.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to come back on that. What I would say is I do disagree that, that it's a conspiracy theory. What initial critical race theory was based on the premise. And the premise actually isn't bad, because critical race theory is actually the understanding that a lot of the laws, the legislation and the institutes did have racism permeating in it. So we can't say that it's completely incorrect, but how it's taught is extremely incorrect. And that's my issue with it. My issue isn't actually the fundamentals of critical race theory, because if we look at historically, why was there a need for the Race Relations Act? Because you could discriminate people in public places, in the workplace, on the basis of their skin colour. So we have to be careful to say it's completely, fictitious and those things that they didn't exist, because that's not true either.
No, we don't, because we can say that critical race theory comes from critical theories, and the whole purpose of critical theories is neo-Marxism to undermine Western society, and we can show that. And we can show that we also have equality under the law in this country, and there is no oppression or suppression of certain demographics, and if there was, there'd be court cases about it. So we can say that critical race theory is peddling dangerous, divisive and toxic ideology, can we not, Mark?
Are you saying there isn't racism, though?
Who said there isn't racism? I don't
think nobody's saying that. Nobody is saying that.
No.
But when you are making very specific and serious allegations concerning the exercise of racial or other forms of discrimination, you have to be able to back that up with real hard empirical evidence. Clearly, apartheid South Africa had a whole series of laws that discriminated against people who were of certain ethnicities. Critical race theory is being peddled by the sort of ideological equivalent of snake oil salesmen and women, like Robin DiAngelo, who are making sweeping revolutionary claims that societies such as Britain and the United States of America today and other Western countries are structurally racist, as if they were just like apartheid South Africa, and that is clearly nonsense.
I think we're still experiencing the residual effects,
Thank you, Lin Mei. I'll ask the questions. Okay. Can I ask you, do the educational elites want people to hate their own country? Lin Mei.
Yes, I sincerely believe they do, and that is clear. For example, the police are going to subject all their employees to a form of critical race theory. Why on earth are they doing this? Yes, of course, they should be rooting out those specific individual policemen and women who practice racial discrimination. But why are they using taxpayers' money to propagandize what is essentially a revolutionary anti-liberal ideology? It's the same with the Tavistock Clinic in terms of their courses relating to psychotherapy. Every dimension of the public sector, local councils are doing this. And some of them are even doing it with really young children. If you look at the Green Labour Coalition in Brighton, they have been telling their teachers that they must instruct their pupils that Martin Luther King's belief that we should judge people on the basis of their individual characters, that is itself a form of racism. I mean, this is
I agree.
Why are we being forced to pay for it?
I agree fundamentally it should not be taught as factual. That's my issue. However, for us to completely dispel, again, I agree with Calvin when he says the laws in Britain, they are for everyone. My issue is the application of the law, and there are multiple reports to show that people from certain ethnic backgrounds are treated differently than, let's say, other backgrounds, and that's where I have an issue. Yes, in an ideal world, the law would be applicable to everyone and everyone would be treated fairly, but that's not the case. So we're dealing with residual effects of the past where people from black and ethnic minorities, Asian minorities, we can see even in recent reports when it comes to black men and Bangladeshi men, even though the majority of ethnic minorities are overqualified for various positions, the promotions in the workplace just isn't happening.
But the problem is,
why is that then? Why is that?
It's so difficult to have a conversation like this when you're conflating so many points. Are you asking a question about crime rates, or are you asking a question about employment? What is the question you want to get to? We have to really pin this down, because when you just conflate these things, you make it sound like the country is institutionally racist, which we know is not the case. So what I want to ask you is, how should we be addressing this topic of history in schools? You say we shouldn't be teaching critical race theory, but as a fact. But you seem to be arguing in favour of it as a moral perspective. So how should we be addressing this?
My issue is we shouldn't be teaching critical race theory as a fact. However, what I don't want to see is us brushing under the carpet. There are still issues in Britain with people from certain ethnic backgrounds when it comes to employment, when it comes to policing, and when it does come to some of the institutions. Again, I'm not going to say it's a completely institutionally racist country. However, we have to look at the facts and the reports that are there. For example, name bias. It's a real thing. If you have an ethnic name on an application form, it is harder for you to oftentimes get a job. These are facts. So I'm worried that if we completely dispel any conversation around race and just say, you know, the law says that everyone should be treated fairly, which it does, it's my application. The law is not being applied equally. However, going back to critical race theory, I do not believe it should be taught in schools as a fact, because we don't teach communism as a fact. We don't teach socialism as a fact. We don't even teach Christianity to be the truth anymore, and this is a Christian country.
For shame. Just to wrap up, one final question for you, Mark. How can we combat education being dominated by these terrible, toxic, divisive views?
Well, the politicians in the current government need to step up to the plate. I mean, this is happening within the public sector institutions under their watch. I mean, what are Suella Braverman and the other ministers actually doing? They're tolerating this. What are Conservative-led councils doing? Because this is also happening under their watch. So, of course, you would expect, you know, the Green Party in Brighton to be using taxpayers' money in this way outrageously. But why is it that centre-right politicians are allowing this to happen? So there's got to be an element of top-down change, but also philosophically, those of us who believe in the principles of a broadly liberal society need to start fighting this ideology and calling it out for what it is.